alumni, welcome to InterVarsity World Changers, the podcast celebrating God's world-changing work in and through InterVarsity alumni like you. I'm your host, John Steele, and today we're talking with Will Scheopner, a University of Nebraska Omaha alumnus. And Will is changing the world one student at a time in UNO's College of Business. As a career advisor, Will is dispensing hope, encouragement, and life direction to hundreds of students each semester as they discern their calling in the world of business. As a note, Will's opinions and perspectives are his own and do not necessarily represent those of the University of Nebraska Omaha or the College of Business. All right, thanks for tuning in and enjoy Will's episode. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, John.
Yes, really glad to have you here. Will, as we get started off together here, will you just give us a quick introduction, help us get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, all. My name is Will Scheopner. I am a University of Nebraska Omaha undergraduate alum. I currently am finishing up my master's degree, MBA, from UNO, and I work full-time for the university.
Okay, that's awesome. And in addition to undergrad and grad work there at UNO, you also are an InterVarsity alum, an important part of people joining us on this podcast. Tell us just a little bit about your InterVarsity story, how you met InterVarsity, and maybe like a standout memory or especially meaningful moment that you had with your chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. So my InterVarsity story actually starts a very long time ago. I grew up, my family has attended the same church for almost my entire life here in Omaha, Nebraska. And one of the congregation members at our church when I was a very little kid were Eric and Stacy Rafferty. I know Eric does a lot with InterVarsity now, but they came to Nebraska to plant ministries at Nebraska colleges. And so I grew up going to worship every Sunday, and every year, a couple of times a year, there would be a chance for our congregation, including like little 8 or 9-year-old me, to hear about the work that God was doing through InterVarsity on sports teams and in Greek life throughout the state of Nebraska. And as I look back on it now, I realized that I really enjoyed and was energized by the stories that Eric and Stacy would share about their ministry. And so I grew up in a church that supported InterVarsity's work at colleges here in Nebraska. And so when I decided to attend Nebraska University, it was almost a no-brainer that I was gonna participate and join InterVarsity once I got to UNO. I got plugged in right away. Like I mentioned, I already had some familiarity with what InterVarsity does and this idea of bringing Jesus' light to every corner of campus. And so jumped in right away, got a chance to co-lead Bible studies initially, and then to help to lead our ministry through some staff transition, as well as through the COVID-19 pandemic, as we shifted Bible studies online and worked to meet students where they were in that way. So, and then I'm thinking about the second part of that question and that idea of like a standout moment, and it's tough to narrow it down to like one standout moment. So if you'll allow me, I will give you like 3 very brief snippet vignettes of
That's
moments
awesome.
in InterVarsity.
Yes, love it.
Meaningful. So the first one, I mentioned COVID-19. This is something that impacted universities in the way that InterVarsity does ministry around the world. But it was something that we also felt very distinctly at UNO. We went from doing in-person Bible studies and sharing meals together to a campus that was 100% online. And so I, as a kind of a baby Bible study leader and co-leader, got a chance to be a part of that pivot to online ministry and what it meant to show up for students in a time where everything was changing, where nothing was the same, where some of the students in our Bible studies were dealing with health uncertainty and financial uncertainty and uncertainty about whether they were going to continue or be able to finish their education. And so that was a really powerful experience to be kind of a burgeoning leader during that moment. Second InterVarsity kind of experience that I want to highlight is I got a chance to go to as I moved from my undergrad into my graduate program at UNO, I got a chance to attend the National Leadership Institute in Chicago this past summer to think about what it means to serve faculty and staff and graduates. I was not yet in my current role as staff at University of Nebraska Omaha. And so I went in really with this idea of like, how do I connect with the other graduate students and lead ministry in that way, especially without a consistent graduate group or a graduate Bible study that we were leading. And the ability to be around people that are so passionately called by Jesus to serve in their campuses and are working to develop the leadership skills to do that well was a really powerful experience for me. Last short vignette is I actually met my fiance through InterVarsity.
Yes.
We met at an inter-campus Christmas party. Neither of us were super jazzed about attending. We felt like we needed to, but it wasn't necessarily like the top thing that we had circled on our calendars for that day. And we met for the first time at the Christmas party and hit it off. And now a couple of years later, I'm super excited to be marrying her this upcoming August.
Will, I love those stories. That's really awesome. It's so crazy to me to think about. So before you even went to campus, that you had like the better part of a decade of hearing about InterVarsity from the Raffertys coming to your church and telling these stories about what's going on campus. So you have this experience of consistency and hear it like, okay, I keep getting this picture painted for what it's like to be a part of InterVarsity on campus. So much so that you get to campus and you're like, I know which group I'm going towards right away. I'm getting involved. And then after a decade of consistency, your leadership jumps in at COVID-19 and everything just going off the rails in a totally different direction of like, okay, after a decade of hearing how to do this, we are reinventing how to do this. And I am like right there in the middle of it. And then to jump into grad school also, where you said that there aren't a lot of other like grad peers to be doing this with. And again, you're sort of like forging ahead into this brand new space. And then meeting your now fiance, all of these very new things after a history of like, okay, this is what it looks like, but that's not what it looked like at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Consistency is a good word for it. And then thinking about how like that consistency shifted in some really dramatic ways over and over again. So
yes.
Gotta keep my eyes open for those surprises. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that some of these this life of surprises with God is some of what will play into a little bit of your story that you'll share with us as well, of like, oh, this is not the way I anticipated this going, but okay, let's see where this leads. But before we get too far into that, Will, we're this podcast, InterVarsity World Changers, we're talking about when we were students on campus, we would hear about the vision of lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. Like we would hear that all the time. And I imagine in church for the 10 years leading up to it, those were some of the things that were being shared from up front pretty consistently as well. Lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. And here, obviously, we're leaning into that idea of world changers and what does it look like for us to partner with God in his world-changing work. And I'm excited to hear some of your story of what that looks like, because my understanding is you're partnering with God in some pretty cool ways, like maybe ways that feel somewhat parallel to like a staff engaging with students experience, but in a different office altogether. So I'm excited to hear about the ways you're partnering with Jesus as this career advisor in the College of Business at UNO. So let's start here for just a moment, and then we're going to backtrack a little bit. But like, tell us what is the role that you have? What does it entail, and how long have you been doing it at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. So I work as a career advisor in the CBA Career Center within the College of Business at UNO. My undergrad and master's degree are from here. I utilized this office throughout my undergrad experience. And the work that I actually do is connecting with students about anything career related. So I sometimes say in jest that a lot of the conversations that I have are helping students who are in the midst of their education to continue to answer the question, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes puts it in a lighthearted way. But ultimately, the purpose within the College of Business is to prepare students with the education and experiences to be able to step into careers where they can find purpose and meaning, and where they can make an impact. And so the work that our office as the CBA Career Center does is really anything that's career oriented, career related. We're helping students to do that. My day-to-day work is really focused around meeting with students and helping them from everything like the very concrete, building a resume, updating resumes, writing cover letters, practicing interviews, to those really big questions about, I'm studying business, but I don't know what I want to do with that when I finish my degree. What should I do? So career exploration conversations, help searching for jobs or internships. That can be a struggle, especially since we all bring in kind of these internal interests. And so finding a way to connect the education with those interests and develop a way where we can find purpose and meaning and livelihood through that. Those are the types of conversations that I get to engage with every day.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. I love hearing about that. Like just the very practical of, like you said, what do I want to be when I grow up, to continue exploring that, especially now that they're starting to get some fuel for that fire of like, okay, I'm actually learning some things in my classes, but what does it actually mean to do this in real life? And that you get to sort of walk through those paces with them, talk about internships, talk about applications, and what their education could look like in day-to-day work life, which is such a huge question that so many of us have, and that you get to just like walk right along other students in that is really cool. How long have you been doing that up to this point?
Yeah. So I started in August. So I finished my first full semester this past fall. And this is the first week of classes back at UNO right now as we're recording this. And so I'm jumping headfirst into second semester.
Okay, nice. So you've got a few months under your belt of being able to walk through some of these things. Okay, I like this is so great, and I'm excited to hear more about how this is unfolding in very practical ways. But let's pause there and backtrack just a little bit, because where you're sitting right now and what you're doing right now isn't what you anticipated doing at this point, is my understanding. So take us back, however far is helpful, junior year, senior year, whatever is helpful for this. Before things changed, what was your plan for next steps after graduation, and then what actually happened instead?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back a little ways, but we'll speed through that part and we'll get right to junior year. So I decided on business as a senior in high school. Really with this idea of, I was interested in communication. I was a speech and debate kid. And as I evaluated communication programs versus business programs, I felt like the resources that I could gain by being a business student and the skills that I would develop were going to set me up for success in the long run. And so I came to UNO as a member of the CBA Scholars Academy, which is the business honors program here within the College of Business. With a declared concentration is what we call them, but a declared major in marketing. And with this idea that like, I'm going to learn these marketing skills, but then I'm going to pivot that into a career in communications. So that could be PR. I wasn't really sure what it was going to look like, but I knew that like ideas are powerful, and I want to be a part of sharing those ideas in whatever way I can. So that was kind of the path and the trajectory that I was on. I got a chance to do a couple of different internships in my junior and then senior year. In my senior year, the internship that I did was with a small to mid-sized tech company headquartered here in Omaha, and I loved it. The culture was fantastic. The team I was working on was great. I had a lot of freedom to kind of explore the things that I was interested in learning in an internship, and getting to actually put those into practice within the organization I was working for. And so I did that throughout the summer before my senior year, all of my fall semester senior year, the spring of my senior year, getting ready to graduate in May. But in December, that would have been December 2022, there was a lot of conversation at like a national and global level about like, are we headed towards a recession? What's going to happen? And that was something that impacted my company directly, with just the uncertainty of like, is the product that we provide to other businesses going to be something that is going to be impacted by a recession? And so the conversation that I had with my manager, this is one of the coolest things that I think I really admire how this was handled, which is a conversation that was really candid, which is that they didn't think that they were going to be able to hire on people from the intern class at the end of the internship because they didn't know how it was going to affect the business, and they wanted to do right by us and not risk us getting settled into a new role only to be laid off later in the year.
Wow.
So that was a conversation that I had right before my final semester of my undergrad experience. And it was really something that hit me very hard because I love this company. I still love this company. And I saw myself like, this is going to be my first job out of college. And so to kind of have that, it was never given, it was never guaranteed, but it kind of felt like the rug got pulled out from under me. And the question I had is like, gosh, I've invested my time and my resources into like doing this job really, really well. And I thought I was going to have a job after graduation, and now I'm going to have to go find that. And so what I decided to do was go back and get my MBA, because I figured if I can't find a job now, let's just make school take 2 years longer and I'll find a job in the next 2 years. So I graduated with my undergrad degree in business in May 2023, started the MBA program in fall 2023, and started at the same time a graduate assistantship supporting our Center for Professional Selling, so supporting the sales students within the College of Business. And I did that job. I loved it. I got a chance to be a part of another great team, faculty that were really engaged and passionate about what they do. And the breakdown of my job was about 80% administrative stuff, working on the online learning system that we use, supporting faculty, helping to plan events. And then about 20% getting to actually connect with students as they ran into problems in classes, helping them to practice sales role plays, answering the questions that they had. And that was one of the most rewarding parts of that job, was getting a chance to be a face that students knew and somebody that they could come to when they had questions that they wanted to practice. So a little background, graduate assistant contracts, I know they vary based on the university probably, but I signed on for a 10-month graduate assistant contract. So I was contracted from August until May. But life goes on and I needed to do something over the summer. So after my first full year as a graduate assistant, I had a chance to step into a summer graduate assistant role for those 2 months that I wasn't under contract in the student success team within the College of Business, specifically supporting our high school business camps and the pipeline program that we have to reach underserved students here in the College of Business and bring them into the College of Business, help them to have a great camp experience and to really envision themselves pursuing business in the future. And then supporting the work that the student success team does to support the whole student experience within the College of Business. And in those 2 months, everything kind of changed when the previous career advisor decided to move back home to be closer to family, and put in their notice that they were not going to be able to do that in a remote capacity. And so I'm in the office already. I'm in like the suite that all of the student success team is in, and had a couple of really powerful conversations with a few folks in the hallway that just encouraged me to consider, like, would I be interested in working full time for the university? Is this something I'd be interested in?
Huh.
And it felt like just the way that the timing worked out, that God was really like making a really clear point that like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're not under contract right now. You're doing this thing. You get a chance to do it full time. You can still have your tuition paid for. Like, I'm giving you this opportunity, and I want you to take it. Which was that was a really powerful experience for me.
Yeah.
To see, like, after a series of like door openings and closings and what felt like a lot of uncertainty, to just have this extreme sense of peace about, like, I'm supposed to at least put my name forward for this and see what happens. And so I got the position. I interviewed for the position, got the position, and then started that just in time to support our students throughout last fall.
Wow, this is so amazing to me. Like, hearing, outside of your time on campus, and and even the time that you weren't on campus as a student with InterVarsity, but doing things online and some of that, like, during that time, were you getting a sense that, sort of like helping other students walk through important phases in life was something that was really meaningful? Like, did you have any sense? Because it sounds to me like the jobs you've been doing, that first GA that you had, like the 20% that you didn't get to do very often, but that there was something particularly meaningful and powerful to you about that. And then, like, this summer work that you got to do with this high school pipeline that you were talking about, and some of the students involved with that, and then stepping into this position, like, did you have a sense before doing those jobs that these were things that you were skilled in or passionate about, or was this all just sort of coming to you in the moment?
That's a great question. Hindsight, it's really, really clear to look at it and be like, oh, like, this is something that I got a chance to do, and that God has maybe, like, equipped me with some skills and abilities to do, and a passion to do. And so when you, like, lay it out like that, it's really clear that work in the graduate assistantship, and even going back to my internship, some of the things that I did in internships led into the graduate assistantship, and the work that I got to do there that was really fulfilling led me into the summer activity, which led me into my current role. I'll be honest, like, in the moment, it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like it was all really clear. It felt like it was a series of, disjointed probably has, like, a negative connotation, but it felt like a series of, like, individualized experiences where it was like, okay, now I'm going to do this thing. Now I'm going to do that. And now that I look back at it now, it's really clear that, like, you can kind of pull that thread and see how God was working in and through those situations, to where I am today. But it didn't feel like that in the moment.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, and I think many of us can say that exact thing as we look back on, sort of the years leading up to this one, that you can see, it seems like you have these totally random, disjointed experiences where in the moment it can almost feel like you're saying, this is the thing that I can do right now, so I'm just going to do it until the thing I'm supposed to do actually comes along. And then as you spend time doing it, you look back and you're like, oh, geez, this was all part of, like, God's plan and trajectory of, like, this was preparation, and this actually was part of the thing that I'm supposed to do. Even if it's not specifically the thing that I'm going to do long term, that God is at work in each one of those experiences, and that none of that is wasted or meaningless, that it's all preparation and development that's going on.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. God doesn't waste effort. Like, that was all part of the story. And there's a lot of other parts of the story that I don't know yet. If you were to go back and redo this conversation 5 years from now, I'd be able to point back at it and say, like, oh, God was working in this way. But yeah, that's a really good way to think about it.
Now, Will, when I look at this, when I think about the work that you're doing, it feels like a no-brainer to me that this is, like, world changer stuff that you're doing, that you're sitting down across the table from undergrads who are asking big questions about what's next. How do I prepare for this? How do I think about it the right way? Like, what are things that I could be doing because of the education that I'm receiving now? Like, and you already know this, but maybe some of our listeners don't, that part of the reason that feels so obvious to me is because that's our other podcast that we're doing with alumni, is, like, helping people make the transition to life after graduation. So I'm super excited about the work that you're doing, but I would love to hear, can you just, like, paint us a picture, tell us a couple of stories about, this previous semester, your first semester in this job, or maybe there's stories you have from some of these other experiences as well, whatever helps paint the picture best. But like, can you tell us some stories of moments that you look back on and you say, God put me across the table from this person when they were asking these questions, and because God put me here, I got to be a part of them having a better sense of where they're going next, or feeling more encouraged about where God was taking them. Even maybe they wouldn't identify it as God taking them there, right, but you see it that way. Can you just tell us some stories about, like, here's the way that God's been clearly at work through this position that I have?
Yeah. I'll start off with I have felt just a tremendous sense of purpose over the last, 6-ish months that I've been in this role. And just a tremendous amount of peace about, like, this is exactly where God's called me. Wow. That hasn't always been the case throughout internships or other jobs that I've done. We didn't go through my whole resume, but I've done a lot of different things, and that hasn't always been the sense that I've gotten. Sure. Sometimes it's been like, this is the thing I need to do in this moment. But I feel like peace is like the overwhelming word in the work that I get to do right now. And it feels like it's a privilege and it's an honor to get a chance to sit across from students and to be able to help them with what it is that they're looking for help with. And sometimes, like I said, that's really concrete, and it's like, we just need to reformat this. This isn't, the resume doesn't make sense in the way that it's formatted right now. And so here are some of the ways that we can kind of shift stuff around, and it'll make a lot more sense. And then to get those follow-ups later where it's like, okay, yeah, I got the interview that I was looking for. Thanks for your help. And those feel really, really good. But the thing that just feels like a tremendous privilege is those really hard conversations where there isn't an easy answer, where it's not just as simple as, we need to rewrite this part and it'll work, but where it's a question about, I don't know what I'm doing in business, or I'm getting a business degree, but I'm not, like, I'm interested in sports analytics, and there's not a sports analytics program here. So, like, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm passionate about, but how do I get there from the stepping stones that I have in front of me from right now? And so some of the stories that kind of come to mind as like really powerful experiences for me as a career advisor. And this is a public university. And so my role as a career advisor is pretty well laid out in terms of like what I offer to students. And so to get to go into it with just the headspace that this is an area of mission that God has called me to, but it's not treated as a like an area of explicit mission in my work. I feel a call from God to be kind and to encourage people and to help them to like find that purpose and meaning. And I know where my sense of purpose and meaning comes from, but that doesn't change the fact that the help that I offer can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different students, and that's really what my role is. So. Some of the really powerful experiences that I've had. One was with a student this past fall. I guess sidebar, I got a chance to have conversations with about 250 unique students in the fall semester. So in terms of like actual appointments where they came in and they sat down at my desk or they came into my Zoom room. And so I had a lot of possible like student experiences to pick from, but I picked a couple that are the most powerful to me. One was with a student that has done some really tremendous things and is a leader currently in a company that they have worked for 5 years. They started in high school. They manage a team of people. They do some really cool things, and they do it within the retail industry. And the conversation that we had was around what this student was studying and what they were pursuing a finance degree and wanted to work in finance, and just didn't feel like there was any transferability between this work that they've been doing and what they want to do. And the thing that was really powerful in that conversation was just the vulnerability that the student had to be able to say, like, I don't feel like there's a good connection between what I'm doing right now and what I want to do. And to get to have like that, like perspective, I don't feel that weight in my day to day with what I'm doing because I'm having a bunch of individual conversations. And so to be able to sit back and to have the perspective and to like look at what they're doing and say, like, these are all transferable skills. The way that you lead people, the way that you communicate, the way that you problem solve, that's exactly what a financial services company is looking for. And then getting to sit down with them over the course of a couple of appointments and workshop how they tell their story in an interview was really, really cool. And then there's a happy ending to the story, which is that they got into the financial services company that they wanted to.
Wow.
And so that was a really neat experience.
That's awesome.
And just spoke to me on terms of like I'm not saving lives. But sometimes like that perspective that I or other career advisors can offer can be like a perspective shift for a student and make a really big impact. And sometimes we know that and sometimes we don't. So I'm pleased to be able to like talk about like this one ended in a way, like there's a resolution to it. And that was super cool. But that's a conversation that I have with a lot of different students is I work in retail, I work in food service, and I want to work in marketing, or I want to work in accounting, or I want to work in finance. And to be able to come back time and time again, and like we already talked about this in the context of like God is telling a big story and we don't always know all the pieces to it.
Yeah.
But they talk about like this gap between what it is that they have done, the experiences that they do have, and what they want to do. And to be able to sit back and have the perspective to say, those are all things that are going to serve you well. Like you haven't wasted any effort by becoming great at talking to people and by problem solving and by being a dependable worker and by showing up on time for your shift. Like you haven't lost anything by practicing those for the last couple of years. That's going to serve you in a tremendous way when you step into a professional experience with your business degree. So that's been kind of a one individual story that I've seen happen a number of times in my last semester. They aren't always easy conversations, though. Another one that has been really difficult is a student that has had some challenges in their work experience in terms of the relationships that they've had with employers, the work that they've done, some of the external aspects to what it means to work and the needs that they have versus the work that they're doing. And those are hard conversations where they feel like I've had bad experiences over and over again in the workplace. And people, maybe it's, people don't see me for who I am, or I keep getting into bad situations where I'm doing work that I hate. And that's like it's a canvas that God is working on still, whether they know it or not. And so to get a chance to say, well, what is it about those things that have made it challenging? And there's a really clear line between like career advising and counseling. And I'm not a mental health practitioner. I'm not a counselor by trade. I don't have that training. I don't want to do that. And so to be able to look at it from like the advisor perspective of like, these are the things that we see work. These are the ways that you might consider approaching these situations. Oftentimes those conversations end with kind of an in-depth discussion about what does it mean to tell your story. So sometimes our career journeys, and we see this all the time, are like really like point A to point B. Like I come in, I know what I want to study. I like study the stuff. I do an internship. I get the experience. I go out. I get hired to do that thing, and then I do that thing. And some people have that like straight line journey, and that's awesome. And then other times, like people, they shift degrees, or they have life changes, or they have things that, an internship doesn't sustain what they need to provide for a family. They have to work full time. They maybe have come back to school, or they've done military service and are studying right now as they step into civilian industry. And the thing that is so cool about those conversations is to just get to be somebody that asks questions and then hear them tell their story. And to tell like the really good parts and the like really hard parts. But then to be able to at the end of the day, like I think a lot of my job is about encouraging people. Like people are really cool and they do awesome things. And so a lot of my conversations end with just a reminder that like you have great skills and experiences. You're doing the right things. You're asking the right questions. And it's less about saying like, this is the answer to your question and more about like, you're thinking about it in the right way. And like, this is a journey that we're all on as we like discover what it is that we're called to or what our purpose is. And so that's like a very vague version of a story that I walked through in real time with a student this past semester, where there was some hurt. There was not necessarily a linear journey to where that student was. But then getting to come back at the end and encourage them was a reminder to me that as a student, like that was what I needed to hear. And so that's part of why I feel this call to do this work is like my senior year after I found out that like I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll go back for my MBA. I came and I sat in our assistant dean for student success office, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. This is really, really bad. Like my 5-year plan is like shot. And they didn't try to fix it. They didn't tell me like the things that I had done wrong to get there, or say that like, well, it's all out of your control, but just like make the best of the situation. They didn't offer any of that. They listened to me, and then they encouraged me, and they said like, you're going to do awesome things, and I'm really excited to see where you go on that. And I have stolen that phrase, and I get a chance to tell students that, and it's the best.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Will, do you get the sense that, and I think maybe you actually said this earlier, so I'm probably just stealing your idea and re-saying it. But do you get the sense that whether or not the people you're talking to recognize it as such, that you are just essentially like helping people walk the path of God's calling in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So like I know that, and I know that about like God's call in my life. And while like the kind of limitations of working in a public university, I don't get to say like, hey, this is God's calling on your life.
Right.
This is where I see God calling you.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I still get to see that from like an external perspective, and to be able to be like, man, like whether they know it or not, like God is going to use them in cool ways. And like maybe they'll never know that. But that doesn't change that God is working in everybody's life for his story and the ways that they bump into people too. Yes.
Yes. As you're talking, it makes me think of the 29th chapter of Jeremiah, and I'm going to try not to get stereotypical here, stereotypical Christian. But in that part in the letter that's being written, there's a section that talks about seeking the shalom of the city that you're in and seeking the shalom of the people around you. You know, talking to people who are in captivity about seeking the shalom of the people who took them captive, essentially. And not that you've been taken captive or that you're living in sort of this like Babylon experience or whatever, but that you, whether or not it's that you may not necessarily be rubbing shoulders with other Jesus followers, but that you are purposefully seeking their wholeness, their completeness, their peace and prosperity, and like helping them find direction in their life. And that part of that also is a part of your own like shalom and completeness with the Lord, that you are fulfilling purpose that he has given to you by helping these people pursue their passions and their purpose, especially when they feel a little directionless.
Yeah, I love that, John. Thank you.
Yeah. It's such a cool picture of that you get to sit down and talk to college students. And we come from a ministry that loves hanging out with college students, and you're doing it in a totally different capacity, and it's so cool. And that you are still helping them pursue direction and like, where is God calling them? Even if we don't frame it that way in my conversation with them, where is God calling them? I love that. And so as you think about your time as a student with InterVarsity and the different touch points and experiences that you've had with InterVarsity's ministry, are there like threads that you can look back on as during those times that were particularly formative for developing you into doing the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely, John. the two key threads that I see, I'm going to talk about one that like I saw way back as a little kid, and continued to see throughout my time at UNO, throughout my time in ministry and InterVarsity, and ongoing, is the importance of building relationships. And that's something that I think that we all struggle with in some capacity. It comes more naturally to some of us than others. But so much of building relationships is about proximity and meeting people where they're at, doing the things that they're doing. And I think about like I don't have like a ton of like early memories, but I do have a few. And like one that like I can think about specifically is hearing Eric Rafferty talk about doing ministry with the baseball team at UNO. That like sports was like a natural area that that as they planted ministry at Nebraska colleges, it caught on there. And thinking about like how radical that is in terms of how we connect with people, that it wasn't we're doing a Bible study, come to the student center at this time, hope you're there. But that like the relationship building in the ministry was, oh, you're doing this. Like, I'll be there. I'll support you through that. And that like God used that to like blossom and flourish in ministry. And like thinking about that thread throughout my experience in InterVarsity, throughout my undergrad experience, throughout my work experiences, is that so much about of the way that we connect with people is about like the intentionality of doing that, and being where the people are. And that's something that I see from like that young age all the way to the work that I get to do now. The other part about that is I felt just tremendous support from the InterVarsity staff that I got a chance to be ministered to by and serve alongside throughout my time at UNO, and about the ways that they walked alongside me without judgment and as a support in my life, who continued to encourage me when ministry was shifting online, when I wasn't sure what I was going to do after I finished my undergrad degree, as I, worked through all of these different experiences, both in personal life and church and, ministry and work. And so I think that those two threads, like they kind of start to spin together in this idea of like proximity and like going where the people are, and then being genuinely there. As somebody, not with an agenda, not with anything except like I'm here walking alongside you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what a fantastic picture. I mean, no matter where we end up or what kind of work that we're doing, or if we're not working in the sort of typical sense that we think of, like that wherever the Lord has placed us, in a neighborhood, in an apartment complex, in an office building, in a church, in a school, fill in the blank, whatever it might be, that what does it look like to just to be present with people and to come alongside them in that place, to not say like, well, you've got to come to my Bible study and then we'll start hashing out life together and that's where we'll figure it out. Saying like, no, I'm going to step into your terms, into your experiences, and I'm just going to walk alongside of those with you. I'm going to be a listening ear. When you invite my input, I will humbly and compassionately give that input. But for the most part, I want to encourage you in the process that you're in. I want to remind you in whatever terminology is helpful that God is for you and that he loves you and that he is like cheering you on as you walk down this path of life. And that I'm going to do that right alongside of you. And I love it that that's the experience that you've had from a young age with InterVarsity, that you got to experience it again in some really unexpected and challenging times on campus and in your own transition to life after graduation, and that you get to do that with other people now. And that is just so cool that so much of it is just like just being present with people, and how powerful that is, even if a verbal representation of the gospel doesn't ever enter the equation, that just walking through life with people can be something that sets them on a trajectory towards better health, towards Jesus himself, and that you're just there stewarding the time that you've been given.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good encouragement. Like, I know, like, it's a good summary, but also a good encouragement to me. So thank you, John.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Man, Will, so, I mean, speaking of encouragement, as you think about the experiences that you've had and the things that God's teaching you, is there a word of encouragement that you would offer to your fellow alumni who are listening in, who are asking questions about where is God taking me? And what does it look like for me to partner with him in the ways that he's calling me in this season, in this context, whatever? Yeah. Do you have a word of encouragement that you would give?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the word of encouragement that comes to mind for me, I don't use this verbatim in most of my conversations with students, but like growing up and as a young adult, I had a chance to be a part of a Bible study at my church that it goes back years and years, and so it started out as men that were in the middle of their careers, a men's Bible study that they met early in the morning on Tuesday mornings to study scripture, and then they met super early because they needed to go to work after that. And that group, many of them have retired now, and so I got to step into it as a young man who is a student, learning from these men that have been studying scripture together for years and years. And there's one man, his name's Lloyd. He is a dear friend and mentor, who said on many occasions, as he walked through his life and as he encouraged others, God is driving the bus. And what he meant by that, as he talked about it, is that when you get on a bus, you don't get to choose the route that the bus driver takes, but you get to choose whether you get on or off the bus. And that God is driving the bus, and we might not always like the route, but that we can trust that the bus driver is going to get us to where they need to get us to.
Wow.
And I think that's such a cool, tangible encouragement. So as I think about like my journey and the ways that God has worked through my life, and I reflect on that encouragement that was offered to me by an older man who has this rich faith, I think that's my encouragement to like my fellow listeners, fellow alumni, is that God is driving the bus, and that as I think about it from the career perspective, that means that like we don't know what the journey is going to look like, but we can choose to say yes to going on the journey.
Yeah. Wow. Will, I love that. What an amazing encouragement, and what a great image. Thank goodness for these mentors that we get to have in our lives that can give us images like that we can then just share freely with the people around us. I love that God's driving the bus, that we don't choose the route, but we get to choose if we get in or get off of the bus. And no, that is fantastic. Last question that I have for you, Will. How can your fellow alumni be praying for you in this season of life, and as you continue on your own journey of partnering with God in his world-changing work?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, John. I think that as I think about the work that I get the chance to do and the privilege to do, the prayer that I would ask for is just that as God works in the hearts of young people throughout educational institutions, that he would be giving them clear direction, and that in those ways, whether it is coming to a personal relationship with him, or even just surrounding them with people who kind of bump into them and a little bit of God's grace brushes off, that makes a big difference for people's lives. And so just prayers that God would be working in and through his followers within colleges and universities in a way that tangibly rubs off on those they interact with. And for that, for me as well, that yes. I would have those those eternal like bumping and run-ins with people that God would use me in those ways.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. We will make sure that makes it into the show notes so that people can be praying that right alongside of you. Will, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing this story, and thank you for the work that you're faithfully doing with God on campus. And even as he continues to give you, I would assume, dreams and visions and things that you're excited about for the future, but saying for here, for now, and while I'm here, this is where God has me, and we'll see what happens next. But thank you for being a faithful follower of Jesus on campus in this work that you're doing. for compassionately guiding students in this in the phase of life that they're looking toward. And it's awesome to know that alumni like you are out there changing the world the way that you are. Thanks a lot, Will.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. Check the show notes for more information about today's guest and for ways that you could be praying for your fellow alum. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, take just a moment to share the episode with them, and then be sure to leave us a rating and a review as well. Now go change that world, alumni. Thanks for listening to InterVarsity World Changers. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Santera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Minio.